The 24th of December, 1944, Ardennes sector, the roads below, are frozen black and streaked with fire, where fuel trucks have already gone up, exhaust haze and diesel smoke drift low in the tree line and hang under a lid of cloud so heavy it feels like the whole sky is pressing down, and Leutnant Heinz Knoke is flying the Messerschmitt just above the broken columns, breathing in counts of 4 to keep his pulse under control, because he swore he would not leave these men naked under American fighter bombers. He swore he would not let Jabos rake them apart and drive them from the roads in daylight. His gauges sit clean in the dim green glow, manifold pressure steady coolant where it should be, and the familiar whine from the nose is calm and precise, a surgical tone, his sense of order, his faith that one disciplined German pilot with one tight burst can still decide who lives and who burns, and then the American noise arrives, not like a duel, not like an equal challenger, but like an industrial accident that erupts out of nowhere, a ripping metallic roar that does not sound like an airplane so much as a sheet of steel being torn in a press 8. 50 seconds, opening up in a 2-second burst that turns a German half-track into a rolling torch, and it hits so fast and so low that for a moment Knoke does not understand how the Thunderbolt is even here at this speed, because the jug was, you're supposed to be a heavy tractor with wings, something you could outrun in level flight if you stayed clean and light and disciplined. But what flashes through the haze below him now is not slow. It is a blunt-nosed brute with a wide paddle blade prop disc clawing air, diving, spitting fire and climbing away again before his ground controller can even finish the warning call. And that is the first fracture. Because his entire survival math, I choose the fight I break, first I leave alive, is gone. In the time, it takes those Brownings to chew 2 seconds of ammunition and light a Panzer, and his radio net is already shredded in that same roar, Mertens calling vectors through static that sounds like someone is grinding gravel in the headset, and Knoke feels his breath hitch as he realizes this is not a duel at all. This is throughput. This is a factory rhythm brought into the air. Hit the column, climb, refuel, rearm, hit the next column. The American voice in his head is not bragging. About a kill, it is reciting a work cycle, and that cycle makes his oath feel suddenly fragile because devotion is warm and personal and proud, but throughput is cold and fast and repeatable, and throughput is here now hunting. They used to laugh at it, and Knoke can still hear that laugh in his head like a prayer they all repeated to keep their pride alive. The Thunderbolt is just an American farm tractor with wings, a big, dumb radial engine with 8 guns bolted, on heavy, clumsy, only able to dive straight and spray nothing, a clean Gustav in disciplined German hands can't outclimb and walk away from if you stay cold and pick your moment. That line wasn't just swagger, it was doctrine dressed up as comfort. It was how the fighter arm convinced itself. The sky was still a swordsman's arena where the man with perfect timing and perfect gunnery survives. By the winter, fighting over the Ardennes, that sentence starts lying to his face. The thing they called a tractor does something tractors are not allowed to do. It doesn't wallow and grunt. It launches. Knoke watches one of those radial brutes tear up from a low pass like something with claws in the air, paddle blade prop biting hard the engine, screaming on water injection, and instead of lumbering away the way he was taught, it drags itself vertical, holds speed, and then rips across level flight at a pace that is simply wrong for what he was told that airframe could ever do. Late-war Thunderbolt blocks with broad-chord paddle blade propellers and higher power settings through water injection showed a jump in climb and high-altitude dash speed, and that shocked German pilots who had been trained to treat the jug as slow and safe to outrun. The part that stings isn't that the Americans suddenly grew a mythical super ace. The part that stings is that they changed the machine with hardware, like swapping a tool head, then made hundreds of that change, and then flooded the sky with it. Knoke tries almost desperately to save his worldview in the old way by blaming himself, because self-blame means the duel still exists. Maybe my brake was late. Maybe my rollout telegraphed. Maybe my dive line wasn't clean. If it's my error, then air combat is still personal, still a question of will and nerve. But when he rewinds the engagement in his mind, nothing he saw matches the fencing school picture he was promised. There was no elegant slow-motion dance on the stall edge. There was no sacred 1-second burst through the ring sight where the better artist wins. What happened looked nothing like a duel. What happened looked like an industrial press stroke. That is when he's forced to admit the uglier truth. The problem is not that he flew badly. The problem is that the whole logic his side built its air war on has been outpaced by something colder. His side still treats the Messerschmitt like a handcrafted blade. Every tolerance, hand-fit every litre of high-octane fuel, a sacred fluid that's running out every veteran pilot, an irreplaceable relic, who must be preserved because no one like that can be made again in time. Every scramble is a ritual. Every kill is supposed to prove that quality still beats mass. The American side doesn't talk about ritual. The American side talks about cycle time. A.U.S. Fighter bomber group dives on a convoy, rips a 2-second burst of 50 seconds into trucks and half-tracks, then climbs out and lands on a muddy forward strip hacked into Belgium or Luxembourg. On the ground, there's a line chief like Ramirez, who does not mourn the bullet holes in the wing root or treat an oil leak like a sacred wound. He just yells for fuel and fresh belts. He slams panels back on with field rivets. He wipes cordite and hydraulic fluid off the gun ports. He throws the same Thunderbolt back into the air in minutes because his pride is not beauty, his pride is turnaround speed. Reports from late 1944 into early 945 inches the U.S. Army Air Forces hammered this point. Superiority wasn't just killing a target, it was putting the same level of firepower back over that target again and again within the same hour. Meanwhile, on Knoke's side, every airplane is a museum piece you're trying to keep alive for one more mission. Every litre of decent fuel is a vein you're opening in a dying body. Every experienced pilot is a national artifact you cannot replace. Command still sells that as nobility, a few perfect swordsmen guarding the Reich with flawless discipline. The Americans don't even pretend to be swordsmen. The Thunderbolt doesn't have to be graceful. It only has to be intact enough to haul 8 Brownings back into the sky. The pilot inside doesn't have to be romantic, he has to be available. That's the moral fracture line that Knoke feels like a crack in his ribs he was promised, that pure skill and absolute loyalty would save him and the men on the road below. The Americans are proving that pure skill means nothing if it cannot be repeated instantly and in volume. They don't need to win beautifully. They just need to come back faster than you can recover. And every time that tearing metallic roar of 50 seconds rolls over his band and shreds the net, he hears more than trucks cooking off. He hears command and control itself being choked out. After each pass, Mertens is trying to talk him onto a heading, but the radio is just overlapping screams and static and high panicked fragments that sound like metal grinding inside his ears. The sound is not just killing armor, the sound is jamming their order of battle. The choreography he was taught: climb on the correct sun angle, cut the escort pair off the bomber stream, strike separate clean, simply will not execute inside a sky where the enemy doesn't care about choreography and only cares about coverage density per minute. From that moment forward, loyalty itself starts to feel like a trap instead of a virtue. Loyalty keeps him orbiting over those burning German columns because he swore he would never abandon them to American fighter bombers. But orbiting now means sitting inside the engagement envelope of an airborne production line, a machine that can spit out a 2-second burst that turns a panzer into a furnace and then be back over the same road again before the smoke even clears. Once you frame it like that, he cannot crawl back to the comfort story of, if I'd flown better, it would have ended differently, because no, it wouldn't have. The issue is not that he failed his craft. The issue is that the philosophy he was ordered to die for just got murdered by math in front of him. Knoke and Lange drop out of the pale winter haze exactly the way they were trained, and for a moment it feels like the world still makes sense. High side entry, sun on their backs, closure controlled, not frantic, spacing tight enough to support, but loose enough to brake without colliding, and below them, a Thunderbolt is dragging level just above the tree line, after a gun run on the German column. Knoke feels that familiar precision lock into place, speed, right angle, right range, collapsing like a closing fist, and he rides the sight. Instead of forcing it, lets the reticle drift across the American canopy, and then sends a short burst. Instead of panic fire, the result is immediate and clean. The radial on the Thunderbolt coughs hard and spits oily black. The left wing twitches down the airframe, shudders in that ugly way that means something vital just got torn out of alignment. For a single heartbeat, it's perfect. This is what the veterans always swore was still possible. You fly correctly. You take him apart. You live. He goes to roll out and clear the area and finds out there is no area to clear. The sky doesn't behave like 1 versus 1 anymore, and he understands that in a single 6 second, another pair of Thunderbolts is already in the pocket from low right, slicing in shallow and already spraying. 50 calories down the same frozen road, like they're cutting a trench with fire, not even hesitating after the first one. Staggered. Before he can warn Lang, a pair of Mustangs drops in from high cover with the kind of smooth, patient dive you only fly when you know no one can threaten you from above. Higher still, above even them, he can see thin white scratches of contrail and tiny sun glints of more fighters sliding across position like sentries. What used to be an exit route is just layered kill zones. The shot he just scored means nothing. He hasn't even finished his brake turn, and the air has already been refilled by fresh attackers like a production line snapping new parts into the gap. He thumbs the radio because he needs direction, now needs a heading out, expects Mertens to cut through with cold numbers, but what hits his ear is not control, it's violence. The net is full of that ripping American gun noise, the brutal tearing snarl of 8 Brownings going off so close to their forward strip that he can hear dirt and steel shrapnel bouncing around in the background. And Mertens' voice is climbing in pitch as if someone is physically squeezing his throat. Words smear together. Bearings step on altitude calls. It's all high cracked syllables and static, not because the set is broken, but because the pace of the attack is smashing human speech. It no longer sounds like guidance. It sounds like drowning. Down on the ground, the same thing is happening to Bauer. His entire job is supposed to be speed, feed, ammo lock drums, shove the fighters back into the air before the Americans swing around again. That's the only way this holds. But the runway edge is being walked by strafing runs, long chains of tracer, sweeping the length of the strip, and Bauer's hands have gone from steady mechanical tools to clumsy meat. The drums are heavy, slick with oil and slush. He fumbles the latch. He drops a belt. He tries to grab it, and his fingers will not do what his brain is screaming at them to do. It's not cowardice, it's physical overload. His fine motor control just can't run at the speed the fight now demands. Knoke feels the same failure inside the cockpit. It doesn't come as cinematic terror, it comes as loss of calibration. He tries to shallow out his dive and slide north, just like the book diagrams he could draw in his sleep, and his wrist twitches too hard on the stick. The Messerschmitt snaps a little farther than he told it to. The airframe chatters. For a moment he's not flying it so much as catching it. His breathing, which he'd been keeping on a strict 4-count rhythm to hold his pulse steady, suddenly fractures into short, ragged pulls he can hear through the mask. That tiny break scares him more than the tracers, because breath and hand discipline are supposed to be the last line, the thing that keeps you sharp when you're outnumbered. If those are slipping, then the idea that training and nerve can hold the line is slipping with them. The lie shows itself. They were taught that a few skilled fighters flown perfectly could still break into an enemy strike, take one of them out and claw away clean. That fantasy depends on the fight being discrete, isolated, winnable in neat pieces. What's happening over the Ardennes is not discrete, it's layered pressure. Thunderbolts hammer the road. Mustangs fall out of the overcast. More Thunderbolts arrive before the first group even clears the scene. Strafers rake the field so the next German sortie chokes before it's airborne. The act of doing everything correctly no longer buys time, no longer buys safety, no longer even buys meaning. You can fly by the book and draw blood, and 5 seconds later, you are still trapped under fresh guns you never had the chance to see coming. He stops thinking in words like losing. Losing suggests a contest you might reverse with more will, more rage, more sacrifice. What he feels in his own body is something colder. He feels that his side can't even cycle at the speed the fight is now running. His hands are shaking on the stick, and he cannot force them calm. Bauer can't reload at the tempo those thunderbolts demand targets. Merton's voice has climbed past language into animal noise. Their nerves are boiling over, and the American tempo is not. And that is where the fear changes shape. It stops being fear of dying. He's been living with that for a long time. It becomes fear that nothing he does matters. Precision doesn't feel like a shield anymore. Precision feels like a nice, clean posture you hold while you get buried under waves. The sound hits first. Not sight, not warning, not even the flicker of sunlight on wings. Just that brutal tearing roar from above the tree line. The one that doesn't sound like flight, doesn't sound like an engine, doesn't sound like anything organic, just a sheet of metal being ripped by a machine too strong to care. And Knoke knows it before he even looks. Thunderbolts back in low, raking the road, and the road is full of German vehicles that are not attacking, not charging, not doing anything except trying to stay moving in the winter choke of the Ardennes. He tastes cordite and fuel in his mask before he can taste his own breath. He watches lines of tracer walk the length of a truck column he swore he would never abandon. That oath was not decoration. He has lived inside it for months. He told himself again and again that he was not one of those ghosts who climbed, took one clean pass and vanished, leaving the men on the ground to burn. He told himself he was a shield. He told himself his presence above them mattered. And now the shield is being sawed through in front of him while he is still in the air. He hears himself speak before he fully understands what he's saying. His thumb is on the radio key, and his own voice does not sound like his voice. It sounds higher, flatter, stripped of the bite he uses when he's angry. Break off, dive north, do not re-engage. The words are clear, and the words are betrayal. They are also the only thing that isn't suicide. Every instinct he has screams to roll back in scream altitude, calls to Langer drop into the American strafers, and trade hits over the columns just to force the Thunderbolts to break their run. That is what the oath demands. That is what his self-image demands. That is what he has been telling himself makes him worth more than meat. But he's already seen what happens when you try to stay. The escape lane is no longer an escape lane, it's a layered kill zone. You don't dive to save them anymore. You dive into a grinder that is already spun up and waiting. He knows that if they turn back in, they die in under 10 seconds, and nothing changes on the ground except one more German fighter smoking in a tree line and one more crew chief dragging a body bag through frozen mud. Survival was never the motive, he admitted to himself. Survival is what cowards cling to when they've run out of honor. That is what he believed yesterday. Today he is telling his own pilots to run. His body gives him away. There's no pretending this is just tactical prudence. His pulse spikes so hard he can feel it in his gums, in his eyelids, a pounding behind his eyes that pushes his vision down a hallway. The edges of his world go soft and grey and squeeze inward until all that's left is a small bright circle of instruments and windscreen. His left glove slips on the stick because his palm is suddenly wet and then instantly dry as the cold air cuts through the layer of sweat. His mouth goes sandpaper dry so fast he can't swallow. His breath breaks into shallow sawtooth pulls. He tries to force the old rhythm back in 4-out-4, and it won't come. He can't get past 2.5 without the inhale stuttering like a jammed feed. He feels the Messerschmitt vibrating under him, and for the first time it doesn't feel like a weapon. It feels like a box he's trapped inside. The truth lands in his stomach like cold iron. He is not staying because staying is impossible. He is leaving because leaving is the only option left if he wants to keep breathing. And if breathing now outranks the oath, then the oath was never real. And if the oath was never real, what is he? Below the American guns keep writing the new law in fire. A panzer that was still moving a minute ago is a bonfire now. Turret blackened hatches, kicked open crew, trying to crawl out through heat shimmer that looks liquid. A fuel truck goes up, and for a second, the road turns into a torch line. Knoke knows exactly how that looks from the ground. Thunder overhead, dirt exploding in sheets, hot metal slashing sideways, and no German fighters dropping in to drive the attackers off. He knows how that feels to the men being cut apart because he's heard them talk about it. He's heard ground troops spit the word Jabbo like a curse, half terror and half fury. Where were you? Where were you when they came? The shame in that question is heavier than fear of dying in the cockpit. He has been carrying that shame like armor, promising it will not be thrown at him again. And now he is choosing with full awareness to let that accusation land anyway, because the alternative is to feed himself, and Lang and whoever else is still airborne, straight into an industrial killing cycle that will erase them in seconds, and never even slow down. This is the moment the fantasy breaks. The fantasy says the Luftwaffe fighter is not just another body in uniform. The fantasy says he is a protector. The fantasy says he is proof that discipline and nerve can still bend reality. The fantasy says that even if the ground is collapsing, the sky is still a place where one determined will can make a difference, where you can point your nose down, fire, clean, and physically alter the outcome of what is happening under. Do you? The fantasy dies here, because what he is seeing is not a contest of wills. What he is seeing is a machine that doesn't care about his will. The Thunderbolts don't pause when his people run. The Mustangs don't pull off in respect because someone tried hard. The American attack cycle just keeps rotating fast as breath, and the German columns keep burning, and his order to break off does not save anyone below. It only saves him. The taste of that is worse than fear. Fear is simple. Fear is animal. This is filth. This is worthlessness. His identity has always had two halves: survive, yes, but survive while doing your job, survive while stopping them, survive while making it mean something. He has just cut the second half away with his own mouth. He has told his own people to dive out, to run, to not re-engage, to live without meaning. That's not a tactical adjustment. That is self-erasure. He can feel it happening in real time. The part of him that believed he was the last wall between American firepower and German ground troops is peeling off and dropping into the snow like shed skin. Up until now, shame was something he weaponized against himself in private, a way to keep himself sharp. You said you'd protect them. You will not fail them again. Now shame stops being fuel and becomes a verdict. The verdict is simple: you are irrelevant. Your skill does not matter. Your loyalty does not matter. Your presence overhead does not matter. You are not altering events. You are just generating wreckage with your name on it if you stay too long. The Americans have built a sky where they decide which road burns and when, and they do it with a repeatable rhythm that does not break just because one German pilot throws himself into the fire with beautiful angles and textbook nerve. There is no single heroic dive that can interrupt a supply chain. There is no perfect burst that can unmake mass production. There is no oath strong enough to slow output. As he dives north, as the burning column slides out from under his wing and vanishes behind a smear of black smoke, he understands that something inside him has ended, and it is not courage, it is purpose. The sky used to be the one place where he could still believe he was necessary. The order he just gave proves he is optional. And optional in this war means disposable. The ace myth, the idea that the gifted, disciplined hunter in a German fighter still defines the air. He doesn't get argued down in a briefing room. It doesn't get retired with speeches. It dies. In this exact act, in this exact sentence, he never— I wanted to say a sentence that tastes like metal and dirt in his mouth. Break off. Dive north. Do not re-engage. The strip is half ice, half mud, and all noise has finally drained out of it. Engines spooled down to coughing ticks. Lanterns hung low off bent poles throw a dull orange circle on the slush, not enough to warm anything, just enough to show edges you could trip on. Sheet metal lies in piles like torn bark. Ammo belts are coiled in the snow like dead snakes. Knoke steps out of the Messerschmitt and feels his knees stutter once when his boots hit the ground. Not from drama, just because his legs have been locked too long and now the cold floods back in. Breath hangs white in front of his face and drifts in layers with exhaust haze that never fully clears. In the near dark, behind a line of crates and a canvas drape that's half blown off its hooks, something big sits on its belly in the slush, and at first he doesn't understand what he's looking at. Then he sees the spinner. The paddle blades. It isn't intact. It's not a proud war trophy. It looks like someone ripped the nose and forward fuselage off a Thunderbolt and then slammed it straight into frozen earth, then dragged what was left across rough ground with a truck and dumped it here for later. The cowling is peeled and punched, oil dried to black streaks down the metal in long handprint patterns from where ground crew have touched it with filthy gloves. One of the paddle blades is bent at the tip, creased like a bruised knuckle, then hammered back into something roughly straight, and he can see where a rivet line has been redone with oversized field rivets that don't match. There's nothing elegant about it. No symmetry, no smooth, just mass, just thickness. Just the suggestion that if you bolted fuel to this thing and strapped guns to it and yelled at a mechanic to finish tightening the panel catches, it would go back up. He reaches out and puts his gloved hand against the prop root. He expects cold, and it is cold, but under the cold is density, weight, stubbornness. It does not feel like a blade. It feels like a tool head from a factory press. No romance moves through him, no thrill, no hatred, just a calculation. How many times did something shaped like this dive on his columns today? How many times will another one just like it dive again tomorrow, no matter how many he and Langer manage to hurt? He runs his thumb along a gouge, and his glove comes away streaked dark, and the smell of burned oil and cordite sits low in his throat like a swallowed insult. Lange comes up beside him, shoulders hunched in his flight jacket, face raw in the lantern light. For a long moment they don't talk, because talking has always been about excuses and morale and technical notes and kill claims and how command will spin the report. There is nothing left to spin. There is only this thing sitting in the slush in front of them like a physical sentence. Lang finally breaks the silence with the old line, the reflex line, the line they have both lived on for years. We hit one. I saw it trailing. You got good hits, that one won't be flying again. It lands in the air between them and dies there. Knoke actually feels the sentence fail. He answers without lifting his voice, without looking away from the battered Thunderbolt nose. That doesn't matter anymore. Lang shifts like he didn't hear or didn't accept, and Knoke forces himself to say it in plain terms, not emotional, not philosophical, just technical, because technical is the only language anyone will believe now. It's not about flying better. It's not about who rolls cleaner into the sun. It's not about one perfect burst through the canopy. It's about how fast they put another gun platform over our troops. It's about how fast they turn it around and send it back. We cannot match that pace. He feels the words leave his mouth and hang there, and he hates how flat they sound, because they're not an argument, and they're not even a complaint. They're a report, an after-action line, a law of the air. Lang goes quiet. There's no counter left that doesn't sound childish. The old answers taste ridiculous even before they're spoken. We just need more discipline. We just need to coordinate better with flak. We just need to catch them singly on the climb out. None of that matters if there is no singly anymore, if the other side is not flying duels but running shifts. Knoke keeps his eyes on the Thunderbolt wreck and keeps going because if he stops saying it now, he'll never say it again. Look at this thing. It's ugly. It's bent. It's leaking. And it still did its job. It hit the road, it spat fire, it came back, it hit the road again. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to show up. It just has to keep showing up faster than we can get back in the air. That is their doctrine. That's what's killing us. He knows what he is admitting, and he feels the heat of it in his face, even in the cold. He is admitting that all the sermons they were fed about willpower, about elite skill, about honor in the climb, and honor in the break, and honor in staying on station for the men below were not only outdated, they were wasteful. They spent pilots like him and mechanics like Bauer and controllers like Mertens and the armor on the ground and the fuel they can barely afford to burn to defend an idea of air combat that no longer exists. They told themselves perfection mattered because perfection was all they had left to offer politically, and they sent men to die performing that perfection in a sky that had already been converted into an industrial process. That is the final insult. Not that men are dying. Men have been dying since the first scramble. The insult is that those deaths didn't buy anything. He thinks of Bauer's hands shaking so badly he dropped the ammo belt in the slush while tracers walked the runway, and how Bauer still tried to scoop it up with numb fingers and jam it home, because doctrine said, get them back up, get them, back up, get them back up. He thinks of Mertens' voice shattering into useless noise on the radio while American guns tore the net apart, and how Mertens kept trying to sound calm, because doctrine said, control the air, picture control the flow, hold the line. He thinks about his own breath stuttering in his mask and his own gloved hand slipping on the stick after he told his people to break off and run, and how doctrine said, never leave them naked, never leave the column unguarded, never leave our troops to those thunderbolts. He looks at this hacked, oil-soaked chunk of thunderbolt and understands that doctrine was lying to all of them at once. Snowmelt and fuel sheen collect under the broken nose in a rainbow puddle. Somewhere farther down the strip, a generator pops and coughs, and then settles into a low mechanical drone. You can hear distant artillery muffled by trees, and over that even now, even here, the faint rising growl of another American engine rolling in somewhere out in the dark. It isn't dramatic. It's routine. That routine is the weapon. That routine is the thing he cannot shoot down. He finally pulls his hand away from the paddle blade. The glove is streaked black. He wipes it on his flight trousers without thinking. He does not say, we will adapt. He does not say, next time we catch them. He does not say, tomorrow we pay them back. He just says to Lang, almost to himself, almost like inventory, we are too slow. We are too proud. They don't care about proud. They care about back in the air. And once it's said out loud, there is no way to stuff it back into silence, no way to pretend that the war can still be won by flying cleaner, no way to pretend that sacrifice still equals meaning. The cost is not only the wrecks in the tree line and the bodies cooling in the snow. The cost is that a whole belief system marched those bodies into a grinder after it had already stopped being relevant and called that loyalty. The cold has a way of making everything honest. The strip is quiet in the way a battlefield is only quiet when both sides are just catching breath between rotations. Farther off, someone is still working a generator. Metal ticks as it cools. You can hear distant engines in the clouds, low and patient American, not in a hurry. Knoke sits on an ammo crate because there's nowhere else to sit that isn't wet. Bauer is there too, knuckles split and black where the oil didn't wash off, staring at his own hands like he doesn't fully trust them anymore. Nobody is talking loud. Nobody is throwing rage around to feel alive. That kind of noise has started sounding childish. He doesn't try to comfort Bauer. Comfort sounds obscene now. He doesn't tell him we'll get them next time, because next time means you get to load drums under strafing fire again, while they come back in pairs and trios and layers, and even saying that out loud would feel like mockery. What he says instead is flat, and it comes out like a maintenance note, because that's what the war has turned into for him, not a test of nerve but a schedule. It's not about how well we fly, it's about how fast they get another one up. Bauer doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. They both understand exactly what another one means. Not another pilot, another platform, another gun delivery cycle. He turns that thought over in his head and realizes it is the part he has been refusing to face. He is not in control of whether the men on the road live or die. He never was, not anymore, not since the sky stopped being an arena and became an assembly line. He can dive, he can bleed his engine to the red line, he can pick the perfect angle and hold the perfect burst. And it might save one truck on one pass for a handful of seconds, but what decides whether that road column burns is how quickly the Americans can shove a fresh Thunderbolt back into the air after he shoots one down. That turnaround number, not courage, not discipline, not who is the better shot, is the thing that now writes life or death on the ground. He hates the clarity of that. He hates how clean it is. Because clean means final. Clean means there's no room left for myth. He can feel the part of himself that used to believe in the oath, not leaving ground troops uncovered, not letting columns get butchered while he's still breathing, shrinking down to something small and bitter in his chest. That oath felt like control. That oath felt like purpose. But purpose built on a lie is just a prettier way of saying you were fed to a machine without being told you were already obsolete. He can live with fear. He cannot live with pointless. So he does the only thing that lets him keep breathing without going mad. He rewrites the sky into math. Sortie availability per hour of frontline demand. In plain speech, how fast can they get another armed Thunderbolt back over our heads after I shoot one down? That's the war now. He doesn't have to like it. He just has to name it. Naming it turns panic into data. Data he can at least understand, even if he can't beat it. When he finally stands, when he finally pulls his gloves back on and looks out over the strip, he isn't thinking about being noble anymore. He isn't thinking about being the shield. He is thinking like a ruined staff officer who knows the report is going to read the same whether he screams or not. Perfection can win a duel. Availability wins a war. By winter 44, availability was already hunting us.